Hello everyone, and welcome to the fourth installment of Dungeons and Bagels, where we learn how to make the best out of our pen and paper RPGs. Alright, so last time we started talking about NPCs, non-player characters, how you could implement them into your game in order to add more flesh, to make your world alive. Today we're going to be going into the detail of one specific role for the NPCs, and that will be villains. Now, what's a villain? Think about the last movie you watched, the last Disney movie, to make it simple. There was always this one person that just looked at the hero and was like, you know what, I'm going to make his life miserable. And the guy was such a prick, he was terrible, and he would go out of his way to make the hero suffer. Well, that's pretty much what the villain does to the party character. He is the person that they will love to hate. It's a term that is usually used for villains, someone that you love to hate. Now, what that means is the villain won't be someone that they'll just meet, fight, and they'll be over with him. That's just a random encounter. Villains are more than that. They're recurring, they're there. They take more than one session in order to defeat. There's many ways to introduce villains, actually. They might be introduced just by their names. At one point, the party ends up fending off a bunch of thugs, and they find on the leader of the thugs a strange letter that is signed with only the letter M. And that brings to their attention, these guys have been hired by someone that means us harm. And then they move on further into the adventure. Then they get to catch a glimpse of M, but they can't quite grasp him because the thugs end up blocking the way. A bit later, a few adventures later, they actually end up talking to him. But once again, he just gets out and leaves the minions to do the job. See, that's a villain. He's there, he's a higher power. He could probably crush the party if he stopped there and did it, but that's not what he does. He's there, he's pulling the strings, and he will be defeated at one point, and that point will be a high point in your campaign, but you have to let the players linger. They need to want to destroy that guy. You need to build up that tension. You need to make it personal for them. You might want to try a step-by-step approach to build up the tension. As I said, first they get to know that he exists, then they get to know his identity, and then they need to find his lair. As you can see there, this is my dog's lair. He's not a villain, actually. He's my familiar. I am a druid, he respects me. Moving on. So, once the players finally meet him, you need to make sure that the villain will stick in their mind. You find little things about him that make him memorable. I remember in a past adventure, goodbye familiar, in a past adventure, I had one of the villains be an old city guard. He used to be a city guard until he kind of grew lusty for power, and he actually went over to a mercenary group, and he moved up the ranks there, and he ended up being the right hand of the guild leader. The guy had a huge scar going through his face, bright blue eyes, dark hair, and I remember looking at the paper from one of my players, his paper to keep notes, and I remember in his list of enemies, he had actually noted down that one guard with blue eyes in his list of enemies. That's when it first came to my mind. I was like, hey, I didn't give this guy a name, but I described him enough for the players to recognize him and to seek him out in order to destroy him, ultimately. I was like, maybe I'll do that in the future. Always mention something about the guy so that they remember him. Something that makes him stick out. You know, random passerbys will pass by and they're like, yeah, you see a peasant, you see an innkeeper, you see a forge master, and then someone more important, oh, you see a dwarven adventurer wielding a fiery axe, and suddenly it catches the player's attention. They're like, wait, this guy has something more. That's what your villain needs to be. He needs to have this little something more so that they remember him. Also, when you create your villain, you want to make sure that the players will be able to face him in a foreseeable future. It might be very tempting to look at your third-party characters and be like, you know what? I'm going to introduce them to this villain. He's going to be level 15, and they're going to seek him out for the whole campaign, and then when they finally get him, oh, they're going to be so happy. The problem is, if the villain is level 15, that's a lot of way to travel. That's a lot of game sessions. It will take a lot of times for them to reach maybe level 12, where they have a chance to actually stand up to him and his minions. It will take them too much time. How could I say this? The tension you build in your campaign is like an elastic band. There's only so much you can stretch it until it snaps. And if it snaps, your players lose their interest. They need closure at one point, else they get exhausted by it. So you might want to plan him, depending on the length of the adventure arc you're planning, maybe 3 to 6 levels higher than the average party level. So that way, when they go through the quest, through the encounters, the quest XP, so on and so forth, they gain maybe 2 to 4 levels, depending. You always want to keep a little gap between them and the villain to make him feel more powerful, to have a good boss encounter. Give him a few subordinates, and you're all set. You'll have a memorable fight in front of you. You have to make sure that they'll be able to face him at one point, as I said. Now, how do you get your players to hate the villain? Because there is a very fine line here. The villain represents a bit of how you're going to, I would say, screw with the players in your game, actually. Because he will pull some very, very dirty moves on the party. And you have to make sure not to ruin the player experience with that. Good things you might do to get them to hate the villain. After they recover certain items, you might have the villain steal it. Or actually his minions steal it. So that way the player characters could recover the items during a quest, but they would still have this feeling, man, this guy stole this item from us. That's not cool. We're going to get him back for that. That's one of the ways. Another way could be to have the villain directly oppose them in a quest. Let's say your party is looking for a holy grail, and they learn that this rich nobleman, actually, who used to have a profound adoration for old artifacts, especially holy artifacts, is seeking out this object to add it to his personal collection. But you need this grail in order to purify a well that's going to save 1,000 peoples by purifying the water. But the guy doesn't care about that. He's a villain. He's like, no, I want this for my collection. So at this point, the race starts. The party characters, they try to reach the artifact before the other guy, and the other guy, well, the villain, he puts people in their way, he tries to send them off track, he ruins their quest in a way. So this gets to them, they're like, he's always there, he's always a step ahead of us, we're going to get him. You might also pull a dirty move and get them to like someone in your game. Get them to like a specific NPC, someone that helps them a lot, that's always there, that's always nice. And then you get the villain to dispose of him. Might not seem like a lot, but if you do build your NPCs accordingly, your players will get attached to them. And when you have someone dispose of them, it's almost as bad as if you had killed someone of the actual party group. They will go after this guy. Trust me. If they did love the NPC, they will go after the guy. Now, there's ways you might try to get the players to hate the NPC, but you'll get them to hate you instead. For example, if you get them to steal their items and have them have no way to retrieve them. If you leave them no chance to retaliate to whatever the villain is throwing at them, that's another thing that will frustrate them. If you give the villain too much power, if he's just everywhere, they have nowhere to hide, and everywhere it's just like villain, 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 and they don't get breathing room, they'll just get tired of it. They'll get tired of your game. So you have to make sure to balance it. The villain is there, he's strong, but he's not everywhere at the same time. Also, your villain cannot be perfect. Take all these plans out of your head that your villain is perfect. No, he has flaws. He needs them. And this is how your players are going to attack him. They're going to find his flaw. Oh, he's filled with pride. We're going to challenge him to single combat, but it's going to be an ambush, actually. We're going to have guys waiting for him. We're going to ambush this guy. He's greedy. They find a way, an old cursed artifact. They make sure that he knows that they have a powerful item. Gets them to steal it. The guy is cursed. Things like that. You need to give them a chance to fight back. If your players come up with a plan and you're sitting at the table and you're like, wow, I did not expect them to come up with that. What should I do to counter that? The chances are the villain didn't think of it either. And you should reward your party for actually finding something you never expected. So, with this, I'm almost done with this video. Don't have much time anymore. You will need a villain encounter, a fight at the end. It might be actually a skill challenge also, and that's also a possibility, but it needs to be a high point of your adventure. The fight needs to be challenging. It can't be easy. It can't be done in 1-2 rounds. You need to sit down and make sure that the battlefield, the enemies, the composition, everything will be interesting. You might actually slip in an item in there to help them deal with an overpowering situation concerning the villain. We'll go into this in the next video about designing encounters. I'm going to hold a few videos on designing encounters, the encounter levels, and making encounters interesting, because a lot about D&D, Pathfinder, and all those games is about the encounters, making them interesting. So, don't be afraid to challenge your player when it comes to the villain. You have to make sure that you're going to be scared of him, but that they're going to want to do everything to go out and get him. So you need to balance his power and make sure they'll be able to find closure in a foreseeable future. So on this note, we're going to end this video. Thanks again for tuning in. And until next time, remember, you were born a natural 20. Stay golden, guys.